Good to see you all. It's been a while. My dear friends at YouTube have been very kind to allow me to return to you. And my warnings and strikes and all that sort of have been reduced. Yeah, so I just have to be a bit more careful, pretty much. Um, so you'll actually see in the link, if you go into the description, I do have the new Rumble sort of in the jungle link. And at some stage, I'll be promoting that because I'm going to, if people can go over there and subscribe, that would be great, and try and get it going and all that. And so the more controversial stuff will be shifted over there. So that's where I'll be having the really dark and meaningful conversations in a sense, where I won't be holding back at all because I don't have to. It's as simple as that. So that's where I'm going to have my sort of outlet of controversial subjects. I just need to sort of set up a lot of the mechanics because StreamYard doesn't actually provide free streaming to. They do provide to a few things, but they don't provide to Rumble. So as a consequence of that, I'm going to have to look at alternatives, how I actually set it up and all that. And once I've got it all sorted out, I'll be doing little promotional videos on YouTube and saying, well, that's where the controversial stuff is going to be. Come over and listen to it. So that's how it's going to operate. So I can still maintain YouTube to be able to promote to a wider audience a lot of the sort of the nutritional health, these sort of things. But at the same time, I've got the ability to cover the more controversial stuff because there are protocols for people that have had this and are having a lot of reactions and problems. And I can't put that out because if I put it out, I'll get a strike and I'll get banned again. So I have to be very careful what I do and what I put out. But obviously that information needs to get out to people. It's important that they need to know how to use the protocol correctly and what steps they need if they're having problems. But I can't do that on this platform because it's just not allowed. Otherwise, I'll be considered a bad boy and I'll be spanked. Now I know that Ted would love to do the honours of doing that, but we can't have that. Can't allow him. Yes, he just better be careful he doesn't come across our Tassie Devils. We'll rip him apart. Teach him a lesson to stay on his side of the pond. Anyway, Loki, how are you? Can't believe it's been so long. Neither can I. God, I've been on. I've been on Jonathan's. Obviously, we had the lady that had the so-called stroke after a year of Carnivore when she had an underlying condition that's well known to cause that. So I sort of went through to elaborate so people can understand that these are specific conditions. Doesn't matter the diet; these people are susceptible, and she still is susceptible. And she doesn't realise it, unfortunately. So she'll have to learn the hard way. Hopefully it's not the permanent way and she's not going out on her back. Yes, but it's hard for some people. Also, Bart had me on one of his live shows as well, which was good. And then, Pim just recently, we had a bit of a long chat. So she's going to cut all that up into bite pieces. So we specifically designed it to be a question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. So she's going to make smaller videos of my conversation with her. So I sort of had to discipline myself. You guys know how hard that is. in order to constrain myself to a certain time limit. So that kept Pim happy. So we've done that, collab together. So she'll be putting that up. Anyway, let's move on through people. Aaron, how are you, mate? The troublemaker got finally unmanned. Yes, he's been a bad boy. He's been a very, very bad boy. Yes. Hey, how's it going? Fantastic to have you back. Yes. Yeah, it's been a bit strange. It's been weird, to say the least. But it is. It is good to be back. Um, I mean, I have been on some, as I said, some channels that people have had me on, and I've had the occasional conversation, stuff like that. But it's been really weird that I'm only the only thing that I've been doing is just commenting commenting on comments that people have left and stuff like that on older videos and stuff like that. Yeah, so it's been a very strange, and current topical things have I haven't been able to respond to any more topical stuff or more recent stuff. So yeah, it seems it's a few people out there are going into all sorts of areas, and you got some people going into the repeat world, and some people going in to all sorts of strange ways of viewing carnivore and strange sort of things that they're coming up with or arguing about, which there's no proof for a lot of that sort of stuff. The stuff that they're just speculating, or I don't know where they're getting it from. It's just weird. But yes, now it's going to give me an opportunity to spank some of these people and point out their errors. In the past, it's been primarily people like the vegans and all that, and I've got the sort of the vegan falsehoods sort of playlist that covers a lot of that, the myths and falsehoods. Um, I've done only a few on repeat now that you've got more people that are basically either going down that way or arguing about sugar in that way, the way they argue. And it's all about, like thyroid and stress hormones and all that. They seem to not understand some basic biochemistry and physiology, which is just crazy. But I'll have to basically. I'm going to go through and pull apart some of their arguments comprehensively. I've done some videos that cover repeat sort of nonsense, but yes, we never got an opportunity to me or Bart to joust with a fellow. He took the quick way out horizontally, and so he never gave us the opportunity to challenge him in a debate. And towards the end, he was probably not making a lot of sense because of the damage that his own diet did to him. So, it is what it is. But there are still a lot of, Georgie Blinkoff and people like that are still just pushing the same nonsense. So nothing's changed there. So it's really these arguments need to be pulled apart comprehensively. It's ridiculous that people still don't understand how gluconeogenesis works. So it's and it's interesting because it basically, in terms of Gibbs free energy, it's close to neutral. It's a hydrolysis process. So there's no way it can actually create any stress. It's not a stressful process to produce glucose. It's not like reversing glycolysis, which would be very expensive, because, you basically are using something like 96.2 kilojoules per mole in total I think it's 77 something for some of the steps. I just can't remember exactly how much. I'd have to look at it again. It's a long time since I looked at it. And so you don't have the same level of energy requirements with gluconeogenesis. So actually glycolysis is actually more taxing on the system, So to say then, to argue then that gluconeogenesis is taxing is ridiculous. These people just don't understand basic physiology or the processes, all those enzymatic processes and steps that are taking place. Bloody hell. But anyway, that's for another day, another video to cover gluconeogenesis properly and explain why it's not stressful and it's nonsense. Really, it is, if you want the really short thing, when you're adjusting from one source of energy to the other, and you're going from a glucose metabolism to a fatty acid metabolism, what happens is that period is stressful because there is a certain level of adaptation where you're not getting enough energy. It's the same thing when you fast. Cortisol goes up. Why? Because it's an energy deprivation. When you eat enough energy of any sort, in terms of food energy of any sort, that resolves itself. It's nonsense. And this is why people get high cortisol that have got diabetes and all that due to the Randall cycle. It gets us starving their cells, but they're locking out, energy substrates to be able to use. It has absolutely nothing to do with gluconeogenesis. It's this transitional stage and then things go back to normal. It's ridiculous. They drive me up the wall. The ignorance is monumental amongst the repeat fan club. It's all reductionism. They see these reductionist steps and they can't get their mind that it's a complex system interacting and adjusting based on what the inputs and outputs are happening in the system. It's not some static model in their, arranged, narrowly focused minds. But anyway, I digress. I better get back to reading your comments or your little chats. Anyway, Sonny, hi, Harry. How does having higher percentage of Neanderthal DNA affect what we eat? Mine is higher than the 61% of the population. Mine's higher than 83% of the population, even higher than yours. Well, it does affect in some regards, but not in others. Our requirement, we have a slightly higher requirements for protein, which is one thing, but not like ginormous. But remember, you still need a certain level of food energy, because if you're more muscular, so if you've got the ability to become more muscular, and this is the other thing, Neanderthals were far more muscular, and this is probably why people that have got more Neanderthal DNA have lower myostatin as well, which means they can build muscle much quicker. And I'm one of those sort of people. So I just need to eat protein and I just build muscle, where other people can't do it. They have to really work much harder. So I've got big, beautiful calves. It's just natural because of those genes, I believe. So it does affect, the sort of requirements where most others, if you're somebody who's got a slimmer frame and all that, probably 1.8 is enough. If you've got more Neanderthal DNA, then you pretty much need more protein in that regard to provide for that tissue. So there's those slight differences in that regard. There's a number of others. One is about chocolate, which is weird. It's not that you like chocolate, but more than others, it's just the way those genetics happened seem to just coincide with the molecules. It's probably the fat molecules, the saturated fats. You probably do much better with saturated fats as well, is what I'm trying to say, compared to other people in that regard. So you would, there's those slight differences that would affect people in that regard. So, but I wouldn't get too wound up about it. There is a video that I am intending at some stage to do in regards to that, but I have never got around doing it. Got too sidetracked too many times with other things. You know me, I get sidetracked very easily. It's probably half my problem. I've been told that. Well, J.W. White, J. White, John White, I suspect. Uncle Harry is back. We missed you. Oh, that's good that you did miss me, John. It's good that and you hope all has been well. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, things are good on most fronts. Work front, home, whatever, and all that. So nothing major. A few things have changed. My younger sister's racked off and gone back to Greece permanently. Goodbye. Not staying in Australia. So she's racked off. Missed her family, and they're back there, and she was sick and tired of going back and forward and having her husband fly over to Australia back and forward. So she had enough. Told her senior boss that she doesn't want to do because she was one of the managers in Bunnings, and she just threw in the actual towel and said, "Nah, your shop, you can run it." So she pretty much left. So she's gone, and now she's sort of a consultant, and also an organizer for wealthy tourists coming to Greece, living in villas and stuff like that. And she just coordinates everything, all the services and whatever else, and does some tourist consultancy. It's working for her, so good luck to her. So interesting, So she's found her feet, and doing fine money wise. So yeah. But anyway, it is what it is. Family move around. I mean, so it's just the way it goes. How what are my thoughts on methylene blue? Look, it does help with mitochondria, but I do have some misgivings. Too much can be a problem. I am going to make a video on it, so I don't want to say too much now, and put my arguments why I don't consider it a species appropriate biohack in that regard. But I don't want to give too much away. That's the reason why, because I want to be the first to cover this point from my perspective without giving too much away to the competition. But yes, so that's why I'm not giving you a entirely candid answer. I sometimes do that, I do it deliberately because I want to do the video before other people can use my words. So let's move on. Yes, finally. Yes, finally. He's out of the cage. Yes. Was in the deep Google dungeon. Thank God Ted wasn't there. That's all I can say. Shaya, hello, or hello to you as well. Christina, how are you? OMG, I honestly thought that you stopped these live streams. Hello, Harry. Hello to everyone. No. I was a bad boy. A really bad boy. Yes, very naughty boy. Anyway, certain neuropeptides promoting peripheral neuropathy and temporary reopening the critical because of neuroplasticity. Yeah, look, it does have some value. I've talked about somebody, I don't know whether it was you or somebody else that asked me about this ages ago, but they do have their place. I think that people shouldn't basically experiment with these sort of peptides just willy-nilly, because there can be issues. They should be basically going through some sort of trained, um, naturopath that knows this sort of stuff and deals with this sort of stuff and sort of uses it at the right sort of dosages, and also has assessed people at the right sort of, where they are. So I'm very cagey. It's like even BPC, which is the next question down. I'm very reluctant. Body protection compound 5157. I'm very reluctant to basically recommend to people willy-nilly that as well. Hello, Luke. And
Hello,
Luke is,
Harry. Hello, everyone. So nostalgic. It's been a while.
it has been a time. I have been hearing that you guys are rumbling in your own Discord jungle.
Yeah, there's been quite a bit of unrest, shall we say.
Oh
Yeah,
yes,
but
there's always unrest.
we're glad that you're back, though. I guess that everyone has
Thank
like
you.
a bunch of questions piled. Uh, yeah.
So
Besides
what do
that,
you think of what do you think of these compounds? Ever heard about them?
so I actually heard quite a bit about them because of my own nootropic research. But yeah, I think they are useful in like extreme cases of like brain injury and stuff. But I
Yeah.
wouldn't just have them willy nilly. That's
No.
at least what I would say.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like megadosing taurine to reduce oxidative stress after a stroke or heart disease or whatever, but you wouldn't do it continuously at these high doses. It's just not things that we do. I mean, I did high doses when I needed to reduce my fibrosis and all that. I did it for a period of time, then dropped back to about 20 odd, and then dropped down to 12 for a long period of time, and now I'm at 6. So yeah, you don't want to be doing pushing your physiology in certain directions continuously. It's not. It's kind. I wouldn't say it's indicated to be used all the time. Then you've got also BPC 157, which is the next question, and that again, causes the production of new blood vessels, angiogenesis. Now we don't want that continuously happening either. There are issues that can actually come about from that. So it has its place when you've got an injury to do it for 2 months and then drop it for 3 months and then do it for another 2 months if you need to, in that regard. But it's not an advised thing to be doing long term continuously, these sort of things. It's like Pfizer as well. It does have an inhibitory effect on mTOR, and you don't want to cause derangements to your collagen structures by taking it in high doses every day. So things have to be done, and it's usually people that have got a lot of mitochondrial damage or cancer or things like that, or that actually need to remove senescent cells, remove cancer cells. That's the people that really need to do it, not everyone. And it's, why spend the money and all that? People that are at a much older age, yeah, for them there's probably a bigger benefit. For younger people, there's hardly any. So there's a lot of, and middle-aged people, there's some benefit. It depends how much damage they've done through their life or how little they've done. If somebody's had far less toxic seed oils and many other things and done less damage, they probably need less of these things. Yeah. We just have to be a bit more mindful, and not jumping in the deep end. But if people have got like severe, issues in terms of peripheral neuropathy, yeah, these things can happen, can help. But I would actually do them not continuously. I do them on, off, like, do for a month, then drop off for a month. It's a bit like, you exercise the way you don't exercise all the time. You exercise some, and then you basically allow the body to heal a bit and, find its sort of its mojo, so to speak. And I sort of like to play it like that. The same thing with BPC as well. I like to play it a bit like that without getting too far into the woods. Now, HD, how are you, mate? Now, it can help. Now, the other one, the Paenaton, I think I'm not sure how I can't pronounce it. Pineal on, or something like that. So pineal gland or pineal on. It's a Russian compound used in it's a tripeptide, from what I remember. It's what has it got? Glutamate, aspartate, and arginine. I think the three parts for that. I think that's the three parts. It's a tripeptide, and it seems to have benefits for. It's used by Russians in geriatric sort of protocols that they have. So it's been used now for quite a number of years. So it does seem to have some benefits. Beyond just not only circadian rhythm, sort of resetting some of your internal sort of physiology, but it seems to have some other benefits around in the brain and elsewhere around the body. The problem is there's not enough research out there in sort of Western literature on these compounds, even BPC 157, which pretty much has been banned for athletes, which doesn't make sense to me. I'm going, what's the advantage? They're really going after all of these peptides, because the thing is, peptides have a lot of health promoting effects. So you can actually use a lot of peptides at a higher dose than you would synthesize within your body to affect certain level of reparative processes, to sort of upregulate them. At the end, there is sort of, this is the other Achilles heel of this whole process. There is, how much energy do you have to be able to do those processes? Just because I'm giving you something, if I don't have the mechanisms to do the actual enzymatic steps because I'm not getting enough protein, my system is basically has a lot of mitochondrial damage, so I can't produce enough ATP to support those energetic processes. How well is it going to work? So sometimes it's very important to basically fix the problems. Use the taurine, use the deuterium depleted water, fix the problems before you start doing some of this sort of stuff, because you need to have the capacity to be able to do these things. Now, you can do them in concert with the other steps, but you're going to get more benefits depending on what the state of affairs is within your own body. So it's a bit more nuanced in that regard. But can it have some benefits? Yes, it seems to have some benefits, but it's actually not the major clock. It seems to actually have a more an effect on, like, the clocks within the mitochondria and the other clocks within the body, rather than the main one, which is still driven by pineal sort of, melatonin secretion and that sort of cycle. So you can't overcome a major and light signaling as well, which I'll explain in that video that's going to come out next week. So those sort of things are also an issue. So you can't say, I'm going to take this wonderful peptide and it's going to have these benefits. Well, it's associated that it has some benefits, but it's not going to, if you don't do all the other stuff as well with it, which are the big elephants in the room, in terms of circadian rhythms, it's light, blue light, it's all these things. So you can't have like poor light hygiene and expect some peptides to fix it. It's not going to happen. But they seem to have a sort of an associated relationship because we don't have strong experimental proof, but it seems to have some associated relationship. And it's not only these, there are many other compounds that also, even taurine has a circadian sort of relationship. It's an association, but never sort of like, and that's probably because of the GABA effect, calming you down, lowering melatonin. Actually, taurine has actually even more efficacy than these compounds in terms of research because it does lower cortisol at night, and it also is required for the synthesis of melatonin, especially the mitochondria. So, you can't ignore that there are bigger players, but even I would say that taurine isn't the key player. The light signaling and your blue light hygiene is going to play, like these sort of glasses, or I have a pair which is inside in the well in the lounge area. So it's not here at the moment. I'll have it here tonight. I'll be wearing them, but not here at the moment. So so there is those aspects. We need to be aware of that. Anyway, hello. Isidoro channel. How are you? I did get a recent comment from you as well. Johnny, how are you, mate? Jay? Yes. Thank you. And some YouTube user. You're not spying on me, are you? Keeping an eye on me. Thinking knots. Yes. For my dear, lovely friends at the YouTubia censor board. I had a dream and I saw someone at the grocery store. They had the face of Harry, but deformed eyes. It really spooked me. Okay, you have really weird dreams. That's all I can say. Very, very weird dreams. Okay, we'll leave that. You've been censored. Sorry. It's all right, Harry. Oh, I was probably about my previous comment. Oh, Richard's here as well. Richard! Oh, that was about the 2-minute coffee thing. I was getting my coffee and getting my shit organised. So, it is 11 o'clock. I better have some.
Yes, I can see that you're still not a real carnivore.
No. bloody heretic. Absolute heretic.
And
Yes.
look at me having yerba mate late at night.
Exactly. Another heretic. And on top of that, I don't have it raw as well. And I don't look at
Yeah,
and I don't look
and
at
I
the
use
sun.
salt.
Yeah, exactly. And I use rocks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm really bad. Nathan? Yes. Nathan just had a spiritual awakening. Oh my God, it's Harry. He had a spiritual moment. Dual live stream. Yeah. I've got one tonight, the Eurasia one. So that's happening. I had an ad. You were talking about Odyssey, or yes, depends which Odyssey. Are we talking about the one with Odysseus, or the Homeric one, or are we talking about the channel, the platform? Yes, that one exists as well. There are a number of videos there that I did collaborations with Bart, covering a number of controversial issues and other things that are all over there. There is this for people to go and see. Let me, how are you? Yes, that place, yes, that place should not be mentioned. It's in the jungle. Yes, a rumble in the jungle. Yes, Phoenix, it is. It is in the flesh. Had a haircut as well. Well, I had a haircut a while ago. It wasn't now. I went really down to really short. Dad had actually had just took the whole lot off, and I go, "You may do the same." And as some of my work colleagues said, "What happened, Harry?" Oh, I just decided to do a dad, take all the hair off, just go really, um, yeah, I didn't go, sort of skinhead style. People at work were looking at me. What the hell is it? One lady said, "You look tougher." I said, "I don't know how to respond to that in the current environment." She had to laugh. Uh, yes, yes. And your thoughts on Nesty? Asko's already finished. Lemmy. Just means in Greek, Christ has risen, and I said, yes, he has. Christos Anesti. So is the saying for Pascha, which basically just translates as Passover because it's after the sort of Passover of the Jewish. So we still follow that tradition in Orthodoxy. Anyway, hello mate, how's it going? Welcome back, Harry. Uncle Harry, love you, man. Oh, thank you. Platonic. Let's keep it platonic. Where's it? Let's keep it platonic. Richard, I got a question to ask you. Did you know that lactoferrin and has anti-venom properties? I recently found it and showed it to Bart Server. Yeah, it does. I know that lactoferrin was, or sort of colostrum and things like that were used in the past by doctors for a lot of these sort of reasons because we didn't have anti-venom in the past, and it helps sort of the immune system because interferon, it actually helps, and a number, and it does help other parts of the immune system as well. Obviously, when you in milk, even pasteurized milk has some lactoferrin. Obviously, the high, the what is it called? Oh God, the stuff they really heat really high,
Yeah,
ultra
ultra
high
pasture.
heating type thing. Yeah, ultra high pasteurization. That doesn't have any, but regular sort of pasteurized milk that still does. Yeah, UHT. That's it. Ultra high uh, temperature or treatment. I think it's temperature, ultra high temperature. Yeah. So yeah, that sort of pasteurization, yeah, definitely gets rid of it. The regular pasteurization still has it. The thing that has the most is obviously raw. So yes, it has been raw for a lot of medicinal purposes. Both colostrum, raw milk, and things like that have been used for a very long time in history for a lot of those things. Uh, yeah, send me an email. I haven't. I've been aware of some of the you know these sort of effects that it has. Sort of antifungal, antibacterial, antiviral, and I have heard about before anti-venom, but people have mentioned it to me, but they've never. Um, Somebody did ages ago, and I asked a comment because I was talking about a lot of lactoferrin, if you remember, supplementation, but they never sent me the link or emailed me. So I would love if you could actually email the link to me because I've heard about it, but I've never actually, looked at the or found the information myself, actual, real credible, not just people saying it. but actually looking at research that actually shows exactly or explains a case study where it was used and how it was used. So I haven't been able to get my hands on something like that, so I would appreciate it. It's the Serpanos at protonmail.com. It's the one in Switzerland, which is encrypted and people can't get to, so information is safe from the prying hands of the globalists, our lovely friends in the globalist elite club. Anyway, careful what I say. I may be their next target. Jay, what does the expression "fat burns in the flame of carbohydrate" mean? I don't remember. I've heard of it, but I just do not remember exactly what it means. It's been a while. I'm getting old. Yeah, I have heard of it. I have heard of the expression.
If I remember it correctly, it probably means that whoever is saying that doesn't know physiology.
Obviously, they don't know physiology. Because fundamentally we don't burn anything. We oxidize things at the mitochondrial level, or we ferment things in the cytosol inside the cell outside the mitochondria. So, that's really what happens. But these sort of sayings, it's one of those things. I've heard it before, but I just can't remember exactly the contextual basis for it. It's been a while. Paul is saying, are your thoughts on SD as well, which is what I said. Good to have you here, Paul. Intiel. Yes. My sorry ass is back here in the land of YouTubia. I escaped the cage. Nathan, it wouldn't be Harry if it wasn't 2 hours behind the chat, 15 minutes in. Yeah, exactly. I'm glad. Yeah, well, I had to have a bit of a bit of a chat and a bit of a rant and a bit of, that's normal. You should know that. If you've got to get your questions in, you've got to get them early. And if you don't know that, where have you been sleeping? Under some big rock and are not aware of that? Hard logic. Yes, thank you. Yes. Alban. Harry, thanks so much for educating me about deuterium. Yep, not a problem. You're welcome. In our talk on the Bart K snake diet video. Yep, that's true. You left some comments. Game changer. Question about eggs, given their water content. Are they a high deuterium food? Nope. Animal foods just aren't, because remember, you're not the protein part of eggs is higher in deuterium than the protein part that you'll find in meat, in the flesh of an animal. Yeah, it is slightly higher because it's used as a growth factor for the chick to grow. Because that's why the child actually sucks out of its mother deuterium, and mum actually can actually go into there have been mothers that have had pregnancies and gone into cancer remission, because of deuterium depleting from the child. So it's, while it's been, sucking away a lot of the growth factor. So yes, in that regard, but unless you're extremely lean and have very little body fat and not eating sufficient food energy, then yes, you may end up in a very expensive way, and potentially also causing yourself, rabbit starvation. You may end up oxidizing some of those proteins, and that wouldn't be a good idea. But generally speaking, we don't, and so we're using protein as a structural material, as a material to create polypeptides, enzymes, and many other things. So yeah, that's not the so Anyway, so pretty much those sort of things are to keep in mind. So I would say the fats are the important part. Fats and carbs are what we oxidize at the mitochondrial level, and that's really what is important. So if you're looking at anything, I would basically be more concerned about the sources of food energy than anything else. And on a carnivore diet, they're going to be below the 130 ppm, so it's pretty much completely irrelevant in that regard. So I wouldn't worry at all. Because even meat itself has about, can vary depending on the meat type. It's around the higher 130s up until the mid 140s. So it does vary quite a bit. Now, obviously, it's still lower than sugar and most other carbohydrates and fructose and stuff like that. They tend to be much higher. The refined stuff, anywhere between 45 to 60 odd ppm, and obviously the seed oils are way beyond that, beyond the 255, which is just toxic at those levels. At any amount, it's toxic. So that's where with carbohydrates and all that, it just, when you eat a lot of them, it takes many decades to sort of get the damage, where with seed oils, it happens a hell of a lot more rapidly and quicker. And it's the reason why, as we shifted in the 90s, like tallow was given up for seed oils within the fast food industry, we saw this rapid increase in a lot of sort of disease in the population because of the high deuterium and a lot of mitochondrial damage, which we're understanding now that mitochondrial damage is a big problem. Anyway, Sarah mentioned the supplements were high in deuterium. I wouldn't really worry. Supplements have got so little stuff in them that it's just irrelevant. It's pretty much irrelevant from a deuterium perspective, because the volume is too small to worry about. Now, it depends what supplements we're talking about. If we're talking about protein powders, yes, and that's why I don't do protein powders. So I want the stuff, the level of deuterium that would be in food, not the level of deuterium that's in powders, which is even higher. Now, we need some deuterium in our collagen structures to give them rigidity, and especially in our bones, because it's mineralized collagen, but we don't want too much. Too much can be a problem where we get stiffness. This is why sometimes I was talking to a naturopath a while back, and he basically he'd actually consumed a lot of seed oils, so had a lot of deuterium built up in his fat cells, lost rapidly weight, and ended up, damaging a lot of his mitochondria, and also putting a lot of deuterium into his collagen structures, and he felt like he was stiff as. So he'd gone low carb, and he was just so stiff, he couldn't believe it. He was struggling with stiffness and joint problems and all sorts of things, just by losing rapidly weight on a keto type diet, without taking into consideration his past exposure. And this will be an issue for many other people if they're rapidly losing weight and not deuterium depleting or diluting the level of deuterium in their system. This could be a problem if they've been exposed to high deuterium foods in the past and they've stored that in their fat cells. So it's an issue. I have talked about it in regards to cancer. I did a video ages ago, I think 2 years ago, which sort of covers that point. I may throw it back in the actual in the community posts so people can actually see it and look at it. So yeah, look, it's taurine in the free form. We don't want to bound to anything. We want it in the free form. It's a less of an issue in that regard because it's sulfonic acid. Sulfonic acid isn't the same. It's not. You can't oxidize and it doesn't, and it's not used as a structural material. So it's not used in. It may be involved in regulatory things and a whole lot of other things in the body, but it's not used as structural material. So even if it was high in deuterium, which it's not, compared to many other powders and supplements, it still wouldn't be a problem because it's not used as in that regard. But no, it's not an issue as long as it's in the free form, which is usually produced in North America and also I think Germany is the other place. Now, the stuff they produce, the manufacturing process that's produced in China for L-taurine is different slightly. That will have higher deuterium levels. And the reason why it have higher deuterium levels also because of the process that they use and the water that they use puts back far more. It's a bit like, when you do refined oils, that it's sort of because of the water content used and some of the solvents and many other things that are used in the manufacturing process, what ends up happening, it actually adds more deuterium or this heavy sort of heavy water or heavy hydrogen into the actual system. So it's a manufacturing issue. So I would never buy anything with L-taurine in it completely. So I buy the free form, which is manufactured differently and doesn't have the same issues in terms of deuterium and many other. And it's not only deuterium, there's a lot of other chemicals from the solvents and many other things, or little trace elements that are left behind. So I would stay away from that crap. It's cheaper. That's why it's cheap. You can actually buy big one of the L-taurine 1 kilogram bags and all sorts of things at very low prices for $10-20, depending on where you're getting it from. But that's why I don't buy it. I'll buy little containers like that, which I'm paying $30-40 for. So it is what it is. But I wouldn't get too wound up about in terms of it's like the vitamin D, tablets as well. Very little in it. Obviously, you don't want to be using the ones that are used, and most people get concerned about. Oh, it's got sunflower oil or all these sort of things, and it's going to have higher deuterium and all that. Yes, it is, but even there, the volume is very little. What I'm concerned is it's an unstable fat, and what it will do, it will become rancid and degrade the vitamin D. That's my concern there. So I just want something stable like coconut saturated fats or medium chain triglycerides, which are even better because they're specific fats. There is no PUFA in there. There is no monounsaturated fats with a single bond. There are no bonds where oxygen can come in and oxidize them. So very stable MCTs. That's why I go for the MCT, the sports research one, which has got MCTs and it combines with the vitamin D and it actually minimizes any problems of degradation to the vitamin D product. So that's my sort of thinking behind that. And the quantity of deuterium is so damn low. People get upset. They'll go and have some fruit, like berries, that have got more deuterium than even one of these pills, and they'll get upset about the pill and they'll ignore the berries. I'm going, it just doesn't compute to me at all. Dylan, thank you, mate. Yep. Is your brain food? We even from gluconeogenesis, we can actually produce all the glucose we need. We don't need to eat it. So our brains work very well doing that.
I don't know.
Doesn't even have to be discussed. It's just normal physiology. And we can take ketones and produce fats inside the actual, and even there is a proportion, probably about 20-odd% that we know in other animal forms that actually 20% of free fatty acids can also cross the blood-brain barrier in rats and many other animals. So I suspect it happens in us. We just can't do those experiments on us because they're unethical. But if they're happening in other mammals, I suspect they're happening in us as well. So I would say there is enough energy going into the brain. It's usually what is called diabetes 3 or insulin resistance, which is a construct again in the brain, and it's usually a consequence of the Randall cycle. And so, so you don't need, it's best to disengage the Randall cycle by not consuming very high levels of carbohydrates with fats. Then you've got a problem. So that's where that sort of happens. And even at the filaments, we basically utilize glucose at the filaments. Every muscle contraction uses glucose. Doesn't use fat, doesn't use anything. All the fat and everything else happens in the mitochondria. That's where it's oxidized. It produces the ATP. That ATP then runs the phosphocreatine cycle, and from there, actually, that provides a phosphate to the filaments to be able to provide that glucose to the filaments. So that phosphate and then the release of phosphate, that energy is to produce that glucose, which goes to the filaments, and you get the contractile things. That's a 3-cog system. So, oxidative phosphorylation happens, but it's actually supporting this other 3-cog system. It's not, and they're working together. So it's not what people say you need this. Body can produce enough of it, and as I'll explain in my future gluconeogenesis video, I'll explain why people are completely wrong, and it's via hydrolysis, and the Gibbs free energy is close to neutral. So it's like spontaneous. So you don't even have this sort of situation where there is a cost, So it's ridiculous that people make these arguments. Cortisol raises when you're transitioning from a glucose metabolism to fat metabolism, or you're going from a glucose to a metabolism. Then it usually comes back to baseline after you've had the adjustment period. More people that are on sugar diets actually have running higher cortisol levels, and they're not running higher cortisol levels either because they're not eating enough sugar and they're wasting away, like a lot of fruitarians, and they're running higher cortisol levels, or they've deranged themselves because of blue light and many other things, which is what most people do nowadays because they have a long screen time, and that's why they're all, they have poor sleep and all that. So you can be on any diet. If you've got poor sleep hygiene with a lot of blue light exposure, you're going to have problems. Sorry, but that's the reality. The diet doesn't fix everything. There is also a lifestyle factor components that need to be addressed as well, that people very much ignore. Anyway, let's move on. Would making ghee out of butter reduce its deuterium levels because of the water evaporation, or is the deuterium left behind? The water content of things like butter, animal foods and all that isn't very high. So that's less of an issue. And while the water content, some of it can go into the matrix of the mitochondria, and even fat still has some level of deuterium, depending 120 or 100, in between the low hundreds to the 120 mark or whatever, there's still a certain level of deuterium there. And there are enzymes in the Krebs cycle that basically take out and swap out the deuterium with your regular hydrogen. So with 1H and take out 2H, which is what deuterium is, because it's got in the nucleus, it has that neutron. It takes out the molecule with a neutron and just leaves the one with a proton, an electron, which is your stock standard light water or light hydrogen or whatever you want to call it. So I would not get too wound up about these sort of things. The advantage of ghee is if people have sensitivity to things like the proteins or the sugars, in particular the proteins, it usually is in that regard. But the biggest advantage is in rural areas is you can keep ghee like lard in a bucket unrefrigerated. That's the purpose of it. It's to have a product which you can put on a shelf and use that is going to be stable and doesn't need to be refrigerated like butter needs to. So that's where, because obviously you're going to have those proteins and all that sort of degrading and going and affecting then the butter and many other things. But if you process the butter into ghee, then it's really good. You can actually just store it away. And that's the purpose of it, really. So, yeah. Anyway, so where were we? Let's move on. In those who eat sad diet or carb eaters or the cholesterol glycated and oxidized, which, well, the glycation is, it depends on the threshold of the carbs coming in. So at a certain threshold, you're not going to get much glycation, and it's usually the body can, because remember, your endothelial cells are actually turning over, like your gut cells, they turn over far more rapidly than any other cells in the body. So those structures are continually renewed and turned over. So in that regard, they can take a hit and then get repaired. It's the excessive hits which becomes the problem. Even in the mitochondria, we're still getting some level of oxidation. Just living, we're going to create some reactive oxygen species inside the mitochondria just by utilizing sugar or fat, and at the basic level, at the electron chain, you're still going to basically create some reactive oxygen species. And that's where taurine, species-appropriate type, furnishes taurine, supports those enzymatic pathways that then upregulate melatonin all day long inside the mitochondria, and they do their repair work. And taurine actually reduces the oxidative stress inside the mitochondria from the stuff being produced as a consequence. So we don't really have to worry about a lot of these things as long as we're not overloading our body with glycating factors. Obviously, fructose being the worst because it's 7 times more glycating. And if you're engaging the Randall cycle, it can get up to 10 times. So that's where your problem lies. Somebody like a vegan doing a glucose, like a potato diet or that, their glycation is going to be way lower than somebody like Paul Saladino doing honey. The threshold of glycation is going to be way higher. And it already shows in his face. He looks older than me and he's younger than me. His skin looks old. And I have a few cheats now and then, and my skin still looks better than his skin. And I've done far more damage in my life with cardiovascular disease in my 40s and stuff like that than he ever did. So I should still technically look worse just from all the damage of decades and decades that I did, because I've only had about a bit over a decade now to recover, but still I look way better, even though I'm more than 10 years older than him, because he's in his from what I believe, mid-40s, and I'm in my late 50s. So, I'm 2 years away from 60. That just tells you how damaging fructose can be and glycating. So we don't want that. Obviously, oils that are rancid and damaged can oxidize, but so can, sugar can attach and actually increase the oxidative damage as well through the glycation process. So all these things can actually really make things really bad. Sad dieters are actually worse because they end up, due to the Randall cycle, they end up pushing more of those factors, fats and sugars, into the bloodstream, not allowing them to come in into the cells at a much more normal pace. There is another component to it. There is I've recently discussed it with Pim on her channel and with the videos that she's going to make and all that. I also view that what we call the Randall cycle, and it's probably why it never became very popular, even though it is absolute, where insulin resistance is a construct which explains a whole lot of physiological processes, but the Randall cycle is actually a real thing that actually does happen inside cells. The only difference is the gradient. And the gradient, I believe, and this is where I make a sort of a different nuance than many other people, the gradient is determined by what I call the effects of deuterium in the diet. So if you've got, in those folds, the inner mitochondrial membrane, so you've got, those folds where all the electron chains are and all the ATPase at the bottom. Well, more of those machinery damage, and that's when large parts of the mitochondria become dysfunctional as you go along. So the efficiency of the cell to take in more energy drops over time. That's why it becomes senescent. And that's due to deuterium damage over a certain length of time. The more of the cells in the body are becoming senescent and damaged and can take in less energy, what's going to happen to the gradient? At the same volume of food, the gradient is going to be a hell of a lot higher. This is why in the past, in the 1960s and 50s, people were on mixed diets. But in the younger age, they were much thinner. They're also, all the actual foods that were being cooked were in lard and tallow. In particular, tallow, like McDonald's were producing tallow and all that. Well, what does stearic acid and also palmitate do? Palmitic acid. It causes reverse electron transport. It actually encourages the mitochondria to produce more mitochondria, to do biogenesis of more mitochondria, which means that you actually even lower the threshold of, you're not only not damaging those mitochondria because you're taking in those animal food, fats, to oxidize, but also you're encouraging more mitochondria to be produced to reduce the gradient of the Randall cycle even further. That is why you only see fat people in older age, back in the 50s and 60s and all that, because it takes decades and decades of slow mitochondrial decline to get to that stage where they have less efficiency in dealing with mixed substrates. Where now we're doing it in the womb practically, because we're poisoning the children. We're doing far more mitochondrial damage, and that is why we're seeing childhood cancers and all these things happening and escalating, and people becoming morbidly obese in younger and younger age brackets, because it's the old similar to the Pottinger's cat, but that was related to taurine, but it's similar for us in terms of mitochondrial dysfunction from one generation to another. And so the capacity for the cell to basically deal with mixed substrates is becoming less and less efficient with each generation. So it's amplifying the gradient over the coming generations as they're getting more and more damaged at the mitochondrial level. So that's why I look at the past and I look today and I can explain the difference and why it takes longer. It took longer in the past on a mixed to get, because you were getting lower gradient of inflammation and lower gradient of this decline, where in our sort of situation it's much quicker and all that. And it also describes the Egyptians, because the Egyptians were doing the same thing the modern people are doing. They were on like a 70% carbohydrate diet and very low fat, and so they were all had man boobs and big tummy bellies and all that. And they actually created their own statues of that. If people have seen some of that. And it's exactly the consequence of damaging their mitochondria at a much younger and younger age. And that's why they got conquered so many freaking times. They got owned and conquered by so many people. Why? Because they were less healthy with each generation and became unable to basically resist the local empires in the region, which consumed more animal foods than they did.
I wonder if that says something about the people today.
Yeah, you have to look at the details and see these sort of how things are interplaying, and once you realise that, you start understanding deeper why these things. I mean, you know me, I pull things apart and I have to work out what works with what and why it works that way and why it doesn't or whatever else. So I've got a weird way of viewing the world, and as I said, I'm a bit eccentric. Guys, I'm a bit eccentric. Yes, we all have our little eccentricities as humans, and so I've got mine as well. Johnny, does glyphosate replace glycine in bones for animals? Nah, it's bullshit. Yeah, look, I know people argue that, but it's bullshit. Pretty much glyphosate will break down to glycine anyway. So pretty much, it's nonsense. It does not happen, and Bart doesn't agree with this either proposition. He just doesn't want to upset certain friends. That's why he doesn't argue it. But I've had a private conversation with him, so no. Glyphosate has other problems, a whole lot of other problems. It does seem to cause a lot of other derangements in the body, in the gut microbiome, severe derangements, because remember, Monsanto's have actually registered it down as a low-grade antibiotic. So it has, your half your large parts of your immune system. Where are they? They're in you've got in the thymus, your T cells and all that, but also large parts of your other components of your immune system. They're in your gut. If you put glyphosate in there and you derange the microbiome, the virome, because there's the virome as well. There's the virome, there's the microbiome, there's whole other parts of the immune system. If you derange those, and this is what glyphosate does, unfortunately, it actually affects certain bacteria, certain viruses, and that's the virome, and certain types of other parts of the immune system, and deranges them, and that's where a lot of the problems then start happening, where we're getting all sorts of, it actually exacerbates as a consequence leaky gut, not in a sort of direct way, but an indirect way. So it's all these sort of things that actually make things worse. But we've never seen, nobody's actually, because people have looked and did some experiments to see whether they could in animals induce this glyphosate replacement. They couldn't do it in rats. So at the end of the day, if somebody, is going to claim something, they need to show mechanism, and they need to show initially in vitro, like in a petri dish, and then in vivo in some organism like an animal model, because you can't do it in humans experiments. It's unethical. And then they can actually then make that claim. they are just presuming this is happening because they're actually finding because of the leaky gut, they're finding inside cells and in whole areas they're finding glyphosate, and that's true. It is around, but to go from the argument that it's actually inside cells and that it's replacing and substituting glycine is a completely different kettle of fish altogether. That's a very different argument to say. Yes, there's a lot of things that are inside, but that doesn't mean that they in order to prove that they do something physiological specifically, you need to do the experiments to show that that is exactly happening. And the person who's making these claims, she's a computer engineer, computer scientist by profession. That is her key qualification. So yes, she does talk to some biophysicists and biochemists and stuff like that, but that's not a right. And I'm not talking about Sarah. I'm talking about somebody else. You know who? So I'm just being a bit cautious because I don't know what her litigation attitude or approach may be. So yeah. So we need to just keep this in mind that there is no solid, hard science in that. And it's like people talk about all sorts of things out there, but they don't have the solid science. You just saw recently how Bart pulled apart that whole pH nonsense. I've read Bart's review study. So ages ago, because he had actually did a video, and I actually went and found the study and actually went through it. And like me, he understands things about electroneutrality as well inside the body, how the ions move around. I sort of view it from a taurine perspective because taurine directly controls the ion channels and regulates the homeostasis of pretty much all ions in the body. And also also has an effect in making sure that there is a maintenance of electroneutrality between the intra and extracellular fluids by the way the positive and negative, those charged ions are sort of flowing, and so it has that sort of regulatory effect. Most of it happens at at the kidney level, at that in that regard. So, and that's how we sort of are able to recycle and bring in and remove certain ions, which is that SID part, SID plus that he talks about. At the same time, that also, the body can hold on to certain things like calcium or whatever else if it needs to. In particular, things like iron as well, which is really important. That's where I've talked about in the university in Gaza, where they're using for young girls who are not getting enough iron, and they're using taurine as a supplement to basically prevent iron-related anemia by forcing the body to hold on to more of it, because it has the ability to regulate iron homeostasis, taurine as well. This is why when people say, I need this amount because the RDI says this amount, I say, yeah, that's for a carbohydrate-based diet. That these be on a species-appropriate diet where you've got the methionine and cysteine to synthesize taurine and taurine from the actual the flesh itself. You've got the osmolytes and a number of other osmolytes, because not only that, there are a number of other osmolytes that are primarily found in high amounts in animal foods that can actually do a lot of this regulation of ions throughout the body. They can make sure that certain stuff gets excreted if it's in excess or held on to if it's not sufficient. This is why when you eat enough protein and get enough of these nutrients, you seem to not, and you don't jug too much water down to create fluid disturbances. Like tribal people hardly drink any water whatsoever. They hydrate with fat and they upregulate their antidiuretic hormones to basically maintain their fluid homeostasis. And they get enough taurine from eating sufficient protein because they eat far more protein than us and fat because they're not scared of it like we are, modern people. And they tend to regulate their bodies very well, thank you very much, without requiring a nutritionist.
But
It's
Harry,
we got.
I thought that I had
Go
to
ahead.
take my weight multiplied by 30 ounces of water every day for my desk job.
Ridiculous. Yeah, I know. Sort of, and protein requirements will vary depending on what your physical activity is. More sedentary, 1.8 is fine. You're doing more. I do a bit more. I do about 2.2. Other people that are doing far more will probably need 2.5, maybe 3. And if people like at the top where Jonathan is just pushing the envelope in that high bodybuilding sort of thing, you probably need 4 plus, But also you need shitloads of fat as well to support all those metabolic processes. It's not enough. Otherwise you'll end up with rabbit starvation. You still need the energy to basically run. And if you're actually having more protein and you're actually forcing to oxidize that because you don't have enough food energy from fat in particular, which is the best one rather than carbs. But if you don't have that, then you're going to force the body to do the things that it shouldn't be doing in that regard. And then you're not even going to get the muscularity. It's like that guy that was very thin, very lean, Robert Sias, whatever his surname is, it's hard to pronounce. Yeah, where that guy was so lean, very low body fat, didn't have enough, and was and just consuming lean meats, and was ending up just having to utilize that. That's why his blood sugar was very high, because he was oxidizing that because he had no other fuel coming in sufficient. So and that's the reason why he had certain issues with certain liver enzymes were elevated, showing extreme levels of gluconeogenesis that were happening compared to regular people. Again, foolish things that people do, and end up in those sort of issues. But I've gone very much away from what Johnny said. But no, there is no research that actually can provide a slam dunk to that. I'll eat my words if they can actually, if anybody that actually argues this position can actually show me clear mechanistic proof that this is happening. Doesn't exist anywhere. I've looked. And so has Bart. Doesn't exist. People can argue whatever they like. Oh, we found it inside the cell. I want to see substitution, not just circulating freely inside a cell. Many things circulate freely inside a cell. Are they being incorporated or not in that cell? So I want an incorporation, because you have to remember that everything has a certain type of protein structure. That protein structure can fit in certain areas. It's like Lego. Certain parts cannot fit in other parts. Okay? So for the substitution to happen, you have to cleave off something to be able to make it fit. By doing that, it's no longer glyphosate. Got it? So, it's simple as that. God. Anyway, would you say Jack Cruz is guilty of reductionism? Uh, mm, mm, not to the degree of other people. Actually, I have a lot of respect for Jack, even though I disagree. I wouldn't call him reductionist, because a reductionist is somebody that is really fixated on looking at certain pathways and then from that extrapolating and coming up with a whole lot of bullshit arguments, like the repeat people do. He doesn't do that. He has a more holistic approach. I think the problem with Jack is the importance that he gives to certain biological processes above others. So, and that, because he knows quite well the further away latitudinally on the latitude you move from the tropics to the poles, in order to basically get energy, you need fat. You need more and more fat substrates and less via cytochrome C. He knows that. You can't get, you may at the tropics be able to get additional energy at complex 4, but you cannot do that same thing at the pole. So an Inuit at the pole can't do the same thing. And even that is not a big percentage. It's not like some massive percentage. You can't live on 30%. Otherwise, we'd all be breatharians. So that's not a logical argument that he's actually putting forward, in my personal opinion. And the argument to say that we can actually deal with deuterium much better at the tropics than in the poles, that's true. If you're completely naked, you're earthing yourself, and you're completely naked, and you're basically from light, you're reducing your level of deuterium by 19 parts per million per hour. Yeah, fine. You can actually that. But if you're guzzling down as a primary source a lot of sugar and seed oils and all that, it's not going to work. The diet still trumps on the deuterium side. You can't deplete fast enough. You don't have, there is a rate limiting enzymatic capacity to deuterium deplete. You exceed that, you get to what we call the toxic levels. And then you start breaking nanomotors, ATPases. It just doesn't work. What he's trying to argue doesn't work, and he uses convoluted language to confuse people so they don't understand what he's saying, so they can't argue with him. Problem is, people like me and Bart do understand. He, because he's the friends, is a courtesy, and that's another reason why he didn't. I tried to convince Bart to basically come on his show when he had Jack there last time, but I got a message from Bart just saying, yeah, you can understand what it meant. Yeah. So it didn't happen, and it won't happen because he doesn't want to discuss these sort of issues at all. He just doesn't want to. So, I mean, okay. Thanks, Lukey, for that. That's the lactoferrin thing. Yeah. So Wes actually dropped into the Discord, does he? Did he? Okay.
That's
okay.
it.
Thanks. Yeah. So you don't have to bother Wes since Lukey's given it to me. I'll just fire it up. I'll read it when I get a chance through the week. I suspect I'll find it interesting, like all things. Yeah, but yeah, I like Jack because he's a smart. He's one of the most intelligent people that I've come across. Like Bart, very intelligent, and I've got a lot of respect for him in that regard. And I know Bart also has a lot of respect for him. He's a very intelligent person. As I said, when it comes to light and how light works and stuff like that, I've learned a lot from going and looking at Jack Cruiser's blogs. So that I have a lot of respect for the man. So and it's really hard for me. And I just wanted to have a conversation with him, but probably Bart knows that I can get on a pedestal and start going, and he didn't want things to get a bit out of hand potentially. But anyway, it is what it is. The thing is, he was a guest for Bart, so it wasn't like it was an organised debate or an organised conversation for third parties to attend. I don't know whether he never told me whether he asked him or not, so I don't know. I suspect even if he had, he probably would have declined me being on there. Simple as that, because he probably, after so many other criticisms that I've made in the past, he probably already knows that I do have some different views about some of the stuff, the way he views things, Deborah. Yeah, but as I said, he's a very intelligent person, and I've learnt a lot from him. Like from Bart, I've learnt a lot. But I do my own research. Bart had his videos, but I went away and looked at the research paper that Bart wrote, and then looked at some of the other people that he's referred to and stuff like that for me to understand these things. It's like gluconeogenesis. I went away and tried to understand how it actually works in terms of Gibbs free energy and in terms of hydrolysis or the steps. It's not a reverse of glycolysis because, as I said, then you would need far more energy. You would need like 96.2 kilojoules per mole in order, and that's far more energy requirements. You don't. I mean, in the matrix, you only need basically when aminos come in or lactate or whatever, you only need basically 2 ATPs, and they are swapped. And that's how you sort of build oxaloacetate, and then you malate, and then oxaloacetate outside in the cytosol. And then you go through the PEP, as it's called, enzymatic cycle, which is about 5 steps, which is where Gibbs free energy is pretty much neutral through those steps. So you can change the whole lot in that regard and end up with the sort of your sort of glucose without requiring a lot of energy to do it. It's, in a sense, it's sort of, they say, they call it spontaneous. I don't like that word. It really annoys me. But it's sort of, it's more like it's cascading through these without a lot of resistance. Through these enzymatic steps, it's cascading through, and so it doesn't have there's only a small bit of energy that's required where you get pretty much 2 CO2s together with 2 ATPs inside the matrix, and that's then you go through all those other steps until you get into the cytosol, and then it's and even those in the matrix are a high, a low, very low energy sort of hydrolysis steps as well. So you've got very little energy that is actually expended. So that's why it's not gluconeogenesis is not an expensive process. It's actually even far less than even glycogen to glucose and all these other things that are happening inside the liver. They actually require more energy, Gibbs free energy than pretty much gluconeogenesis is actually cheaper than the eating glucose and actually converting it to glycogen and then converting glycogen back to glucose is actually more expensive. It's ridiculous, guys. It's absolute ridiculous. It drives me up the wall, all this bullshit. Anyway, let's move on because I'm losing track. I'm probably even further behind now. My grandmother's struggling to get enough protein. You should be whipping that woman. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just joking.
No
And
outer
she
camp here
told me,
moments.
we shouldn't tell them about private moments with old women. I'm just joking. And she told, get more protein supplements or things to look for. I'm not familiar with protein supplements hypes. I tend to basically encourage people, if they're going to use any protein, use a bovine sourced one. None of this. If you go for the stuff which comes from the plants, like your soy and all this sort of stuff, the amount of chemicals that they have to put in that sort of stuff is horrendous, and all the other stuff in the high deuterium, the water content, all that. In usually a bovine concentrate, there is less processing, and it's coming from an animal source, which is going to have less deuterium. There's a lot of benefits all across, and so you go for a bovine, grass-fed bovine concentrate and you're going to get a much better amino acid profile, because most of the supplements, let me just explain in terms of supplements, which is important in terms of protein sources. Now, we have the bioavailability that everybody talks about. What is bioavailable? We know that things like meat, dairy, eggs are either 100% or just close to 100% meat in terms of nearly close to 100%. Dairy and eggs are 100%. That means they're very bioavailable. So you get them in your system. Not a problem whatsoever. But the utilisation is different. So eggs are about 40, I usually say 50%, but it's about 47% approximately where it's at, the actual value, but let's just round it off to 50 for argument's sake. And when it comes to meat, it's down to 32%. That's the amount that can actually be used for protein synthesis. So what's the rest going to be used? The rest is going to be used for gluconeogenesis. The rest is going to be used for to build polypeptides and transporters, protein transporters that move things around, for enzymes to break things and build things up again, catalyzing things. You've also got structure around the in organs and stuff like that, which you're going to use some of that. So your organs won't atrophy because you need aminos to replace some of the actual cells. So you need some amino acids that go into the Krebs cycle, actually produce new amino synthesize sort of aminos and all that, and then they'll push them out, and then you can use those as components to build new cells and whatever else. So that's all that sort of stuff, all the machinery and where the rest of it goes, and also for detox. So the phase 1 detox in the liver requires a number of amino acids as well. Your immune cells require a number of amino acids as well. So there's that part. So you can't starve your body of protein. It's not a good thing. So that's how we would use that. Now, in terms of the quality for protein synthesis, I would say that generally around the third of that should always go to protein synthesis, and it shouldn't drop below that. Most supplements are down to about, so let's say eggs, for instance. Even eggs can be an issue. If you have the whole egg, it will be 47%. Guess what happens if you're only using the egg whites? It goes down to 17%. That's why it's not. So whole eggs are a better source for protein synthesis than the egg white. Oops, some bodybuilders and a few others got it wrong, didn't they? And then a lot of the actual plant proteins are down to 17% or less. And if you go for spirulina, I think it's 0 to 7%. Don't even why that is even a protein supplement. Some of the algae protein supplements, they're all at similar levels as well. Why are people using? I mean, you might as well just, that's not even protein in my classification. Let alone there are protease inhibitors in those things that are coming from plants as well, which is going to actually reduce. That's just the available. Doesn't mean that some of that isn't going to be inhibited from the protease inhibitors that got through the process. So generally speaking, the poor versions. Most supplements, which are what we call isolates, which are sort of pharmaceutical grade, they are also down to 70%. So it's half that of meat for protein synthesis. So they're not a good source. And the problem is that the older you get, you actually even need more leucine. So if you're like a young person, 2.5 to 2.6 is what you probably need, depending on the body size and, all these other things. When you get into middle age, you need about depending on the size, whether you're short, tall, how big you are, it can be anywhere between 3.2 to 3.5 as a rough measure. And then if you're like over, especially 65, definitely after 70, your levels go up to 4.5 grams of leucine. So you're nearly doubling the amount of a young person's requirement to get the same level of protein synthesis. Now you understand why I usually say, and taurine can actually bind to the mTOR receptor, especially as a higher affinity in the bones, but also in the muscles. And what it can actually do is increase protein synthesis. That means the effect of leucine can actually be amplified. That's why I like combining the two together. That's what I did with Dad. I mean, remember my old man, got hit by a car, not even a fracture, strong bones at nearly 90. Well, in January, he will be coming January. These things don't happen accidentally. They happen because people put in the right stuff to make the stuff work and be strong. So I would say if you're going to get a better, higher than 17%, it's not going to be to the level of meat, like 32%. It's going to be somewhere in between. But a bovine sort of not isolate, but a bovine supplement, which is a non-isolate, will be probably one of the better, combining a bit of leucine and combining a bit to make sure that the leucine threshold, so you look at, okay, you put a scoop of 40, 50 grams of that supplement. I'd actually give that person more than the 30, up to about 50 odd. And I would actually add to that, a couple of grams of taurine and making sure that I was getting at least, I would say, 5 grams of leucine. Because remember, even in a fasted state, with leucine in the system, you can still, because you're turning over cells and there's aminos from your own cells moving around, you can still actually force them into protein synthesis as well. So now you know why I don't sort of talk about branched chain amino acids which cross inhibit, but it goes straight for the leucine with the taurine and the protein bovine concentrate. So I use those in combination to get the best protein synthesis in older people, because they struggle to basically eat enough meat and stuff like that, and so I'm trying to get the biggest bang for my bucks, so to speak. This is how I started with Dad. I pretty much did it in this way, and he was a bit more, problematic, as I would say, or difficult. Obstinate, annoying. Should I add more expletives about my father? Anyway, so I know what you're going through, So I pretty much had to convince him to change a lot of things, but eventually I split the actual 30 and 30, the bovine concentrate that I got, plus I made sure that he got sufficient. It ended up being 6-7 grams of leucine a day. It was probably about 3 and 3 plus what was in the concentrate, with 2 grams of taurine with each one of those. And he would have one a bit earlier, one a bit, like an hour later, and he could tolerate that, the quantity. So he sort of ended up having 2 smoothie type things rather than just one, which was much harder for him to, he would throw it out. So it was much easier just to do the 2 anyway. I know. I just paid for that. I don't want any more. Or in Greek, that's an άλλο. Yes. Anyway.
Harry, I think I'll be going, by the way.
That's how it went with Dad. But eventually, he now he eats a lot of meat, which is good. So I'm glad he's sort of made
that is great.
a big shift in his life. Yeah. What's your experience been with sort of people that you've been dealing with?
Yeah, about that. So I think I've mentioned to you before that it's been over a year now. I've been making lots of friends and going to a nearby church group and stuff. And well,
Good.
you know me. I would have to talk about health and nutrition and be enormously controversial. And yeah,
I bet, especially in Brazil, it would be with a lot because people have
yeah,
been brought up on carbs for many years.
yeah, a bunch of like here in this in my state, like most people are descendants of Italian and Portuguese as well. So that like shifts the
Mm.
whole perception of things, especially for the Italians and everything. But yeah, and, with my parents, I've been making more and more of an influence over time, and that has already helped them a lot. Even if they're like, you know, remotely, not even remotely close to being carnivores, but just by eating more meat, it
Yeah.
has changed everything for them.
Mm.
And my mom's
True.
hair,
True.
even her attitude, it's the most remarkable thing. It's my mom that has become a more calm, reasonable person. Even my dad
Yeah.
commented on that. Yeah, but as for my friends, I think that young people haven't had enough issues to face things, to
Yeah.
believe what you're saying. Unless someone has
Yeah.
had a different experience, like they have a really hard time. And don't even get me started on the medicine students, the nutrition science
Uh,
students. Those are lost causes, frankly.
yeah. Look, it's like talking to a brick wall. I've had
Yeah,
conversations with people like that, and you're actually pointing out where they're wrong. And it's quite stark. And then you go, it's still like, yeah, yeah, it's like you're having conversations past each other. My information is just going past them, and I'm registering their information. Unlike, because other people, they can get into a situation where they're not listening and they can completely go past. But the problem is, even when I've realised where they've made their errors and I'm pointing them out, they're not listening. It's just like, I don't want to hear, don't want to know. The book says it this way. I don't want to know. You go,
yeah,
well, the book's wrong.
it's wrong.
Or your
Yeah,
academic who's actually telling you is wrong because he's using reductionist research, or he's using, or she or he are using reductionist research, or they are looking at epidemiological research,
conflicts
which
of
is,
interest.
yeah, it's poor science, it's junk
It's
science,
junk.
it's just association.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, well, when I see, I'll believe epidemiology, nutrition epidemiology, when I see, because it's, the correlation between shark attacks and ice cream sales at Miami Beach are very closely correlated. You know,
yep.
so the R value is really high. It's not low; it's close to 1. That means that the likelihood that it's anything else is unlikely. It's really high. The correlation. There's no scatter. The dots are very close to the line, which is when you've got a high R value. I'll believe that research that really happens when I see a shark standing right next to the ice cream van. Then I'll believe it. You know, if you believe in that sort of fantasy world that the shark's going to end up right next to the ice cream van, oh God, do I have things to sell to you? You're so gullible.
I mean, Harry, look, those people they're having like, so they'll have those drinks that it's like basically industrial way with flavoring added to it because it has protein
uh,
in it. Instead of eating a steak, let me have the chocolatey industrial way.
that's it. And a lot of that's, there's. It's not like it's not even a concentrate from food. Because there are some companies out there that will do like egg concentrates, or they will do dairy concentrates that are actually, or like liquid whey you can actually buy in a bottle, which really comes from a dairy farm. And that's actual real food. A lot of this sort of stuff is isolated and with a lot of chemicals and all that and concentrates. Yeah, it's not the same. So, and it's not as if you're taking one little tablet with very little deuterium. Here you're taking large quantities every day for decades. On that front, I'd agree with Sarah completely. That's a problem, those sort of supplements. So it depends on the supplements we're talking about. But, if you're talking about supplements which have got a large volume, they're going to bring far more deuterium in. And if you do that on a daily basis for many years, that's why I don't encourage people, even in bodybuilding or stuff like that, eat real food. Eat eggs, eat steaks, eat real food. No, do not eat powders. First of all, the actual utilization is low, it's down to the 17%. So, you're saying I'm getting 50 grams of protein. Well, 50 grams of protein from a steak is going to give you're getting the same amount that you would get from half that. So if you were to talk about 50 grams of a protein shake, would be equivalent, because you've got about, roughly, it's not exactly, depending on the cuts of meat, it can be 24, 26% of the actual 100 grams as a percentage, which is 3.53 ounces. But, you would be looking at something like the equivalent, 200 grams. So nearly about slightly over 7 ounces of meat to get the same amount as in that smoothie. But since you're only getting the half the utilization, really it's not 7, it's 3.5 ounces. It's 100 grams. That's the equivalent what you're actually having. So you're having very little meat equivalent for that because of what you're utilizing for protein synthesis.
Yeah, it's funny. I keep again.
It is absolute pathetic. So if you've got something like, let's say, 500 grams of 500 grams, which is slightly over a pound of meat. So 1 pound, 1.6 ounces of meat that you're actually getting, nearly 2 in that regard. So let's say you've got that amount. You're looking at, so 5 times 25. You've got 125 grams of protein in that regard, and so you have to double to get the same. You would have to sort of double that for the supplement. You would have to be consuming 250 grams of protein powder to get the same. So one big steak and then 250 grams of the supplement to get the same level for protein synthesis. Now that 250 grams that you're going to get in that, what does that cost you? And also the chemicals, the solvents, the the possible anti-nutrients that have been mixed in there, because you don't know their manufacturing. Who knows? All sorts of things. And so I wouldn't be putting that sort of crap in my body.
And it's so common. Like the standard nutritional advice, they basically beg people to use that stuff. They'll even share recipes of how to make a sweet and hide some whey powder in it, or add whey to your oats or whatever. It's like so frustrating, And people they don't even care. They're like, no, but I'm a fit person. I have to use this. And you know what? I keep getting compliments on my physique and stuff, and people say, "Oh, what do you do?" I just eat real food and I train. And I don't even train particularly hard, okay? I'm very disciplined about it, but there are guys that I know that do a lot more than I do, but have nowhere near the same results. Things go well for me because my body simply responds well because I eat well. That's it.
I exercise once a week, you know that.
Yeah.
And still,
Right.
oops. Look at the size of my hands compared to my head. And I'm 58, nearly.
Oh
So, and I'm just once a week. And
no,
remember, it's just a protein,
just
the
yeah,
leucine,
exactly.
Deuterium, amplifying that whole process. Do you see a whole lot of tribal people in gyms?
None whatsoever.
Unless you're using anabolic substance, you want to become really big.
Yeah.
I can justify the gym for that purpose. For that purpose. So if you want to really build or rapidly build up muscle, gym's fine. But if you want to maintain muscularity, you need the protein. Sorry, but
Exactly.
you do. Otherwise, you're going to lose it.
And here's the other bit recently as well, Harry.
And the older you get, remember, the utilization drops,
drops. Yeah.
which basically means you need more.
Yeah.
So the reasons are not clear because we don't have really strong experimental evidence. Does this happen also in tribal people, or is it just in modern people because of mitochondrial dysfunction? Possibly would be the reason.
Yes.
And the variability that exists is a hypothesis of mine, but again, without research. Yeah, and I sort of extrapolated from that, looking at how Mary couldn't keep up with an 80-year-old, and so that person would have had good mitochondrial, levels, density in each one of his cells, so far more functional, and maybe so maybe the levels of for protein synthesis are much lower because can do with much less. And older people that have got more mitochondrial, less energy, protein synthesizing over longer periods of time, and so need more aminos in the system because we know, remember the argument that you only need a certain 30 and all that. And this recent research actually vindicates what I've been saying, that you can eat as much as you like and it just slows it down in the uptake. They use nuclear sort of markers to work out where it went. I looked at the animal research and extrapolated from that must be happening. It doesn't turn into sugar and all this nonsense that people say. And remember the rat that 70% protein, it just become muscular like mad with hardly any body fat. It became like a super rat. So I never bought that bullshit, but it's still prevalent out there, very prevalent. But that's just because people just repeat the same nonsense and ignore looking at mechanistic studies and physiology processes and how they work. So yeah, it is what it is. Anyway, do you want to have a go at this one?
Triglycerides.
I want to drink a bit of my coffee. I think he's misunderstanding a bit there, So triglycerides in a low carbohydrate state are not very high.
Yep.
Yes,
Not very high.
transit time is very low.
Exactly.
Uptake is very fast.
Yep. So yeah, you get high triglycerides from carbohydrates. Whatever you're not using at the moment goes to de novo
You'll still
lipogenesis.
get.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
still
if you have a
get.
little bit of mixing, because if
Yeah,
you do like
yeah,
extremely
yeah,
high carb,
yeah. We're still going to be exporting triglycerides. It's basically because with excess glucose, what happens is the body, once it takes in, let's say, even fructose, like I'll give you an example. Fructose comes in, part of it will circulate around, and obviously has some glycating effect and all that. Once it gets to the liver, about half of it will be turned to glucose. In the low fat argument, it all turns into fat. Bullshit. Which bloody physiology book did you read? This is why when we say that it all is sugar, Bart says it all is sugar, and it's going to spike you, and it's going to have an effect on your insulin, he's right. Paul Saladino has no friggin' idea. He should stick to psychology. He doesn't understand physiology and biochemistry. Should stick to psychology. That's his place. His lane, because he's completely ignorant about the other stuff, and he just looks at studies and doesn't even understand them. But getting back to the point, when fructose goes in, that amount is about 17%, I think it is, roughly, will get converted to lactate. Is about, I think it's 25%, which turns into glycogen, because it's more of an expensive process. It'll actually push out the sugar, and if it comes back, then it will repurpose it, because it's a dynamic system. It's always moving things around. We're just talking, if you were just putting a certain amount, nothing else, what would it do to it? Like a closed system, nearly. But things will flow out into the bloodstream, they'll come back, and things go around the place. It's a dynamic system. You have to and it's hard for many people who think in reductionist terms, but now I'm just giving you a very reductionist of small amount, what happens in the liver, just to basically explain what is happening to it. 25% into, and the rest, which isn't exactly like 7-8% or whatever, isn't exactly part of that's going to be turned into fat, free fatty acid, but not all of it. Not all of it will. And then that will be, you'll have a glycerol backbone attached to it, become a triglyceride, and be exported then out as a VLDL. So this is what happens to all these components. Alcohol, on the other hand, actually more alcohol. Yes, it does use similar pathways as Lustig says, but alcohol, more of it will actually turn into fat than fructose. It's only excess fructose, not a certain amount that the body can actually, when it gets, or excess glucose, when it gets really, really high, and the body just goes, there's just too much. I've only got so many enzymatic steps. I can only do so much to it. I can't deal with the rest of it. I'm going to just turn the rest of it to fat. My glycogen stores are full. The amount of glucose out there required for the brain for all these, is, it's coming back and it's coming back into the liver, and the liver's going, it's just too much in the system. I need to repackage this. That's when it starts producing it ramps up then triglycerides. And that's pretty much then, under those sort of circumstances, when you get beyond the excess, what we would call Randall cycle activating, where you would get more of that converted into fat to be stored away safely as triglycerides. And that's why diabetics have higher levels of triglycerides where a vegan doesn't, because they are oxidizing primarily sugar. There's very little fat to engage the Randall cycle. So those substrates don't stay in the liver or in the bloodstream, as have a lot shorter duration, because there is no engagement of the Randall cycle, as we would say, unless they go crazy and they go into excessive levels. Then some of that could be converted, So that's sort of the mechanisms of how things work. It's a dynamic system. You have to think of it in a dynamic thing. Most people get fixated on this pathway doing that, on this doing that. No, it depends on the gradient of the Randall cycle, what will happen inside the liver in terms of the same substrates. So glucose, fats, whatever is in the liver, how that gets repackaged will depend on what's happening elsewhere in the system. It's a complete system interacting and signaling and saying there's too much of this or not enough of this or whatever. And it will repackage and redo things, because the body is a very intelligent thing. It's been doing it for millions and millions of years. It knows how to repackage things and readjust and all that to basically repackage and put things out as required. And so even at excessive amounts, you will still end up just putting more into the adipose tissue. and clearing it out because you can't take it up. There's just too much. So the body knows how to sort of do the triage of moving things around, and all the signaling pathways that are actually happening, the signaling molecules are saying, and all these hormones are signaling going, too much of this or that, we need to do this or move that around or send that here. And so that's why I can actually go and actually show you one pathway of a diabetic and show you what happens with his carbs in his system, and then a vegan or an athlete. It's going to be slightly different, what's happening in the liver. And so, that's the relationship of the Randall cycle with the way things get processed and all these things. It's an interplay. It's a complex interplay. And so it's not in the simplistic way that you'll find in the veganerized community, in the repeat community, because their minds cannot think in terms of systems, dynamic systems. They're fixated in narrow, reductionist sort of processes within the body, and from that extrapolate a whole lot of nonsense. That's why they extrapolate so much nonsense, for that reason, because they can't get their head around it. Possibly, the carbs are dumbing them down, I would say. Wouldn't you agree, Lukey?
Yes,
Careful how you answer this question. I will send Ted around.
No, I'd agree quite a bit, Harry, from personal experience.
He's okay, Ted. Don't worry. You don't have to deal with him.
Very nice.
We have an imaginary connection.
The force.
Leonardo. Hi, Harry. Good to see you again. Oh, thank you, mate. I have a relative of mine, benign prostate. Hyperplasia, pumpkin seed oil seems like a good solution. No side effects like stream. Is it safe to use? Well, compared to some of the... Look, when it comes to prostate, there is a key enzyme. You remember this one, don't you, Lukey? Remember the key enzyme? The cofactors that it has for cell proliferation. Vitamin D is the key cofactor. Vitamin retinol is the second cofactor that actually determines cell proliferation inside. It's the enzyme, and it's a similar enzyme in breast tissue. So breast cancer or breast growth, or prostate growth has similar cofactors. That's one. There is some anecdotal evidence that, like yeast type, so you've got derangements in estrogen, so you can use things like calcium D-glutarate to sort of lower those excess estrogen levels, which help with both breast and prostatic sort of growth. So just put in calcium D-glutarate as a supplement, which is a good thing. It also prevents actually reabsorption of certain things, heavy metals and many other things that could be a problem. And the other thing that I have been looking into this a bit, and I actually have found that it seems also that like mold and other fungus or other sort of like yeast and stuff like that, overgrowth or candida and things like that, also seem to be implicated. So a species-appropriate diet away from sugar and all that will also help with this condition. Another one to bang the repeat and vegans over the head with.
Also, that wonderful horse pill seems to help a lot with various cancers and growth. So
yeah, exactly.
Explains a lot.
Precisely. So so we're looking at being a relative, not being yourself. It could be a struggle trying to convince them to make some changes to their lifestyle. Yeah, it's hard with people. Look, I struggled with my father, and my father has a lot of respect for my intelligence. and I still struggled with him, let alone with somebody who's just a relative and all that. Obviously, getting them to eat a few eggs to get a bit their retinol a bit up, and getting their vitamin D status sorted. They have to go and actually measure it and find out where they are. So to make sure that they actually sort that out. But the other thing is, have they exposures in their home, like mold exposures? Are they excessively consuming? Do they have like white in their mouth? That will tell you there's a candida problem, and then they have to go through and try and eliminate the candida, because that can be a problem as well. So seams and all that. The other issue is you can do it. I'm not. You'd have to speak to. I'm not a naturopath, and you'd have to speak to a naturopath to find out, because there's a number of assays that they've used out there to actually determine people's levels of estrogen in their system. And I know oncologists have certain tests and all that. I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't advise you, but he needs to go and ask someone to do the test to find out what their levels are. And if they're slightly higher, then calcium deglutarate would be a very good supplement to deal with that, and also a boron supplement taking for up to 3 months. So you start, and you don't want to do it for too long because it can create potassium and magnesium deficiencies or mild deficiencies, but we don't want those. So what you take is 12 milligrams for 1 week. 1 week. Second week, 9. Third week, 6. Fourth week, 3. And we stay at 3, which is equivalent to about, I think it's nearly 2 avocados, small avocados, for a duration up to 3 months. That should normalise some of the actual hormonal sort of derangements, which is an important thing as far as testosterone and estrogen and things like that in the body, plus clearing out any excess xenoestrogens, which are another problem. The calcium deglutarate will reduce both any excess estrogen but also xenoestrogens in the body, and also prevent them from being reabsorbed, which is critical. Like heavy metals and xenoestrogens and stuff like that, some of it can be reabsorbed in the colon. Calcium deglutarate suppresses some of the negative bacteria that actually allow for the reabsorption. So that's why we use that method. And pretty much if you get him shifting a bit more towards a species appropriate diet, that would even be way better than what he is on currently now. So good luck. I hope that information helps. But needs to do the tests, as I said, for the vitamin D tests, and also, the fungal, whatever else, check for all these sort of things, because they are another issue that has been found higher in people with this condition. It may just be it's associated, but there is definitely an issue here. So it needs to be checked where their levels are. Anyway, so that's about the pumpkin stuff. As I said, some of the compounds in it have some, as I said, plants have medicinal properties. I use them as medicine, not as food. So they do have some medicinal properties. And as if it's cold pressed and raw, and it's not heavily processed to be oxidized or damaged, the fatty acids in the pumpkin seeds probably isn't going to be a problem. Just make sure that he keeps it in the fridge. Don't keep it out. So when you purchase it and put it in the fridge. Once you open it, in that way it will actually slow down the the sort of the breakdown products that will emerge, the oxidation byproducts. Joff, how are you, mate? Yes, Hazza is back. Yes, he definitely is. He is back to torment the Vagoos and torment the Ray Pete fan club. His two favourite lovely people out there. Group of lovely people out there. All I can say. I'm going to make a video on that, so I'm not going to say anything at this stage. So I'll leave it at that. I may even do a collaboration with someone, but I'm not going to mention who. So I'm going to leave that at that, HD. So that's for another day. I have to be careful with some of the stuff. I don't like giving away too much. Like earlier, I didn't say anything again because I want to do a video. So, because once people hear, because I always think outside the box, and then what happens is, yeah, so it's not too far away. I think it's 2 weeks away or 3 weeks away that I'm going to do something in relation to that. Thanks. I do eat more protein than other women my size and lots of saturated fat. Good, Sonny. Sounds good. But with protein, based on the activity level, always based on the activity level. We shouldn't go crazy in that regard, like some people do. Scotty's here. G'day, Scotty.
Yeah, Harry, I'm a bit sleep deprived, so I should get going.
Not a problem. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
It's always nice to be here.
I was hoping for you to stay longer so we can have a chat in the end.
Yeah, I mean,
anyway.
technically I could, but yeah, it's
look. There's always another time. Time. You take care. Pass on my regards to all the friends in the Discord.
Absolutely.
Tell them there'll be more ammo coming their way in regards to the Vagoons and the Ray Petes and all that. I'm getting into the mode now that I just want to take a few of these people out with a baseball bat. I've been focusing on health issues of people and all that. I've got to the stage now I want to go after their arguments. I want to start, going on a full frontal attack. So, because there's a lot of people, like that starting Lustig's gone off the bloody rails, McCullough's gone off the bloody rails.
Yeah.
All these people are going off the rails on a whole lot of nonsense, just ignorance, beyond a joke. And I think, yeah,
you have no idea how much
they need a good damn verbal spanking. Let's put it that way, because the nonsense is just.
I've seen people I've been getting bombarded by videos saying stuff like raw honey for testosterone and things of the sort, and people think that it's all magic and stuff, and I'm like, guys, even if bee products help you, you can take propolis extract with no sugar in it.
Precisely.
I use propolis myself, but and it's maddening because it appeals a lot to young people because they get to eat the naturally sweet stuff, and they call it esoteric health. There's this girl that she's very popular. It's like Veronica on Twitter even. She's like a major Peptide influencer. She's a beautiful blonde as well, and so she uses her image a lot. So there's that as well. That hooks people.
It does. A 58-year-old in Tasmania is going to have a different appeal on a visual level compared to some 18-year-old. But it just shows the destitute of ignorance out there that somebody will put their health in the hands of an ignorant little girl that hasn't hardly lived, and ignore the wisdom of older people that have been around the block for some time, have seen far more, have experienced far more, have made more mistakes and learned from those mistakes. So, yeah, it's just it doesn't completely surprise me, but it does, it is, a bit annoying that large parts of humanity, but again, as I said, they have been conditioned. As my father calls TVs, tochazokut, which means in Greek, the stupid box. That's what he calls a TV, the stupid box, tochazokut. And he's right. It is a stupid box. It basically, it's one of the biggest propaganda tools since the invention of the radio. Prior to the radio and the TV, it was very hard for rulers to propagandize and push nonsense. Now they can, in a very effective way. Probably what social media is a double-edged sword, but what it has allowed is some voices that are opposed to this nonsense to be heard, like myself, like Bart, like Pim and many others. But we're still we do get the message out to more and more people. We do still influence far more people. We do still across the world, and that sort of has the ability to spread up from those people into their families and friends, which is a sort of a positive thing. But the power of the stupid box to influence is phenomenal. And so you can have some ignorant young person who can just blabber bullshit on the TV, and people, styled up with makeup and everything else. And people fall for that because we have a tendency of first impressions, which, you may meet someone like Einstein who is awkward when he was alive, awkward, has sort of, or somebody like Ted, awkward. But people like that are eccentric and stuff like that, and obviously people, because they can't relate to that, or it's not part of their, it's not part of what is produced in their world. This is perfection. This stylized person or stylized model or stylized person, so they are pure, correct, and honest, and all this sort of stuff. And most other humans, we're just, we're flawed individuals. We've got all sorts of flaws in that regard. But we may have a few messages that we've actually looked into that are much more deep and meaningful and useful in terms of utility for a person's life, to make their life much better and all that. But unfortunately, we don't get much traction because first appearances are this stylized, glamorous, or whatever, and most people are just too lazy. They don't want to have to think because they've been conditioned not to. See, when you were in a tribal society, you had to basically pull your weight. Otherwise, you'd get speared or something like that. So you around the campfire, you had to basically contribute or be part of the social fabric or whatever. The further away you get from responsibility and more being told, the more you just go with that flow, as long as, the society isn't falling apart and as long as you're being fed. And so it's much easier for a passive population like that, that's getting enough kibble, enough whatever, to basically just accept what they're told. So that's large parts of the actual problem, and there's a level of inertia to try and get people to get them unglued, which is hard. It's unfortunately it's circuses and bread, like in the old gladiatorial games, circuses and bread. The difference is now it's just kibble and TV. Same stuff. It's the same stuff. That's why I don't watch TV. Occasionally I may watch a movie late at night. It's possibly if there's something interesting. Otherwise, I don't bother. I'd rather look at something geopolitical, something interesting, some YouTube or some other information, or read a book or do something like that, rather than waste my time in brain-numbing nonsense. So people at work are always talking about things that they watched on TV, and I've got
Like
no idea what
reality
they're talking
shows
about
or
in many
whatever.
cases.
Yeah, I have no
Yeah,
idea.
a lot of that. Yeah, Survivor and all this and things like that are happening, and I'm just listening. I'm going, I've got no idea what you're talking about, because I haven't watched the stuff, so I've got no interest whatsoever. I couldn't. Things like that just bore the living daylights out of me. So I'd rather do something naughty than do something than watch some crap like that. So it's ridiculous. So yeah, but it is what it is. It's unfortunately a lot of people have been domesticated heavily. I mean, I think we're all domesticated to some extent compared to tribal people, but some people are heavily domesticated.
Sadly, I mean, I guess I get to be crazy in front of other people and maybe show that there is another way. So I'm doing my part however I can.
Good. Take care. Anyway, you better get to bed.
Stay well, Harry. God bless.
Yeah. God bless you as well. See you, mate. Take care.
See you, Harry. Stay well.
Back with the old boy. Now, William. Hey, Harry. How do you feel about chasing ketones on carnivore by eating 70-30 or even 80-20? Is it a healthy way? No. Be doing the diet? No. It's just complete and utterly illogical. It makes no sense. I mean, people. There is a place for a high fat. Some people have neurological issues, bipolar, schizophrenia. They may need higher ketones for that until things normalise and adjust, and then they can come down to lower. They've actually noticed, even John Hopkins, when they were doing the 90%, 80 to 90% ketogenic diets at some stage, now they've come down to a more mixed, at a lower level of ketones, and they're still getting the same effects. So what happens is, over time, the body improves its fatty acid oxidation, so it can deal with oxidizing fats far more efficiently, and improves, and then things start normalizing, hormones and everything starts falling into place and working properly in the body at their physiological ranges, which they should be. And they will adapt appropriately. So I think as an early stage, if people are, especially when it comes to neurological issues and all that, I also get them to do like phosphatidylserine, because it has the ability to silence certain genes. And if they do have some of those genes that are causing some of these neurological, brain issues, then this could be helpful for them for silencing those genes, and then the diet sort of takes over, and you just do it for a couple of months, like 3 months, and then you just get off it, and then you just so there are a number of interventions, and depending on what people, when people leave me a comment and say, look, I've got this is what's happening with me, then I may recommend certain supplements short-term periods or not, depending on their circumstances and what's happening. So, and I may ask them a few questions about when they tell me for a specific type, have they done a genetic test, or I would recommend a certain genetic test because I know that certain genes are related, and I want to know whether they've got the worst type or the least worst type, and how that could be affecting them. So, because that affects the sort of how you're going to approach the condition. So there's a lot of nuancing, and so I don't, in a blunt way say no, but for the general healthy people, no. It's just complete and utter nonsense to be chasing ketones. You should be getting a sufficient protein that your body needs to function, and you should get sufficient, fuel that the body needs. And I don't subscribe to all these ratios and percentages and whatever. As I said earlier, you're sedentary or just walk around, do domestic work and stuff like that. 1.8 is probably enough. You do a bit more, about 2 to 2.2. I do about 2.2 to 2.2. You do quite a bit more, like a athlete, or you're doing more, 2.5, maybe up to 3, pretty good. You're in the high levels of performance, doing things like bodybuilding and stuff like that. Yeah, then you're looking at 3.5 to 4. So your protein intake should be based on that. And you should be getting sufficient protein, because remember, your body as well just doesn't need only for protein synthesis, needs for a whole lot of other biological processes. You don't get enough protein, your organs will atrophy. You'll have kidney atrophy, like a lot of vegans and vegetarians get. You'll have other organs not being able. Detox won't work properly, because you need, for phase 1 detox, you need a number of amino acids. Your immune system won't work very well, so you won't be able to fight disease, cancer, and whatever else. Eliminate senescent cells, damaged cells. So you still need those sort of things. So that's where our focus should be, on getting the right nutrition to support our body biological functions. And the variations that we do, therapeutic stuff, should be specific for people that have got ailments. That's why there are ketogenic clinics, or deuterium depleting ketogenic clinics like Laszlo has, and what's the other guy that works with him? He does work for NASA as well. He does keto work for NASA, for long duration flights to minimise solar damage to the genetics, looking into using ketogenic diets and ketogenic precursors and stuff like that, and a number of other supplements, and deuterium depletion for the purposes of reducing the oxidative damage to astronauts. What's his bloody name? It'll come to me eventually. So if anybody knows him, he's some black dude, doctor, pretty smart man. So that's what we need to focus on, not chasing ketos. That's just, God, that was, like 10 years ago and all that, people were into that sort of nonsense. I'm still surprised that people even talk about it nowadays. But, it seems like they recycle old crap constantly. William J. Is choline toxicity a concern? I don't recommend anything over 4 grams. And I usually say, I have a protocol, I say not over 3 grams. Then you're definitely safe. That's from all sources. So the only people that need to do because there's enough choline in animal foods, particular eggs, so you'll get enough in that regard. So remember the guy that actually had 25 eggs a day? He was consuming 3.7 grams on average of choline. Okay, if you get over 4, you may have some issues. So you can actually go up to 3.5 grams, not an issue. And he was doing it for multiple decades. So, but I do think that beyond a certain point, the body starts excreting it and starts, you get a fishy odor. And there are some people that can't tolerate because of certain genetics. There's that as well. It's just, if you get a really bad fishy odor, you may have those genetics. So that's an issue for some people. But for most people, that's why they can't tolerate certain foods. and all that. The Han Chinese, on the other hand, like 70% of them can actually endogenously produce, because we can synthesize choline inside our bodies, but not a lot. Han Chinese, on the other hand, can synthesize quite a lot. They should not be taking any supplements. None. Zero. If your background is Han Chinese, zero. Because you could very easily go to very high levels because of the higher endogenous synthesis. And there are other populations that synthesize very little, and so have a high requirement. And they tend to consume certain foods like organ meats and many others that are much higher in choline. So yeah, there is a bit of nuancing there as well in that regard. But for the general public, I usually say there's enough in eggs. I mean, there's enough in eggs, there's enough in meat, there's enough in most animal foods that we don't need to supplement. If you have, like I've got choline genetics that I'm a poor synthesizer, and at the same time I need far more. So if I'm not eating eggs or having liver or whatever, then I need to possibly supplement a bit. And it's also important for the neurological system, as I've done a video on TMAO, how it helps the immune system. So it's very TMAO, which is produced from choline, is a requirement for the immune system to work better. So your T cells, your T lymphocytes, and other parts of the immune system. Another thing that the crackpots get wrong out there. I've done the video on that, so if anybody wants to watch it. So there are requirements for some people more than others to supplement occasionally. I do, when I'm not having eggs, because I'm sick and tired of eating eggs for a certain day, I'll take 2 grams or 1 gram and I'm done. But so usually I got a big container and I will go through that. It'll take, sometimes I just manage to consume it, sometimes not, by the date that it actually, technically you're not allowed to, you shouldn't be consuming it. It's sort of considered degraded. It just means that less of it, you're getting more powder and less of it's actually going to be utilised. So I still continue anyway, cheapskate. But yeah, for the majority of people, probably not. No. So, and as I said, you'll know you'll get nausea, you'll get things, sort of digestive disturbances. You'll get those sort of things if you go into excessive levels and all that. But most people, as I said, unless they've got specific reasons, specific conditions, they do not need. I get people on choline when they've got cancer, for instance. I'll get them on 2 grams a day. And as I said, the TMAO supports. It doesn't do harm. It actually supports. That's why these crackpots see an association, but it's actually being utilised to basically improve the immune response against cancer. It drives you mad how they can see the reverse thing because they're looking at associations and not looking at mechanisms, how it bloody works. Anyway, so we are nearly 1:30 here, so we're nearly up to 3 hours. I'm going to pull the pin because I am going around to Dad's place for lunch. So we've got about 17 minutes to go. So if I don't get through your questions, it's either the afternoon or put it in the comments and I'll answer it. So up. Weren't you up syndrome? You're up par. You've changed your name. Welcome back, Uncle Harry. Be extra careful from now on. Yes, Daddy? Yes. I'll have to be, definitely, mate. Yeah. So up syndrome, you've gone up par. God. When did this happen? When did this did you get a revelation or something, or um, did somebody steal your identity? Kayla? Yes, glad to see you as well. Yeah, William, can someone fill me in? What happened, Harry? I got a strike and a sort of a warning and then a strike and a ban for a period of time. I stayed off for a slightly lengthier time until the strike was removed because any other thing could endanger the actual channel. So I had to basically hold off in order to remove the strike, which has actually happened now. The strike's been removed, so I'm back to 0 strikes in a sense, just the warning. The warning is permanent. You can't get rid of that, the original warning. But the strike is the problem because if you get a second and third, you get canned. So I sort of stayed off to be on the safe side in order to, because they can ban you for different periods of time. So the strike, I went for the whole period in order to avoid getting another one. Because if you get one, you can just come off and try and allow it. See, for me, it's not my income. I'm not getting income. I've got a day job. So this is a gig that I just do for the community. So there is no, I'm not promoting, selling, or anything like that. So in that regard, I will be promoting coffee for my brother, but I'm not getting anything for that. They were supposed to send me the material. They didn't. Anyway, so I'll have to remind them. So I'll be promoting his, but that's like a family thing. It's not like personal. I'm not making anything. And, so it's the coffee that I usually get. And I get it for free as well. And the reason I get it for free is because I'm part of the family. Simple as that. So, but that's what happened with me. And you just reminded me that I need to call him and say, where's the ad stuff? Because I was supposed to put some of it on to promote that. Sadly, I had combo viral gastroenteritis. Ooh, nasty. And the flu. Ooh. Yeah, look, when I dropped my vitamin D to do that experiment, remember Wes a while ago, and I dropped my taurine levels, I ended up getting the C19 from Dad. And so, but I only got a little bit of a scratchy throat. That's about it, nothing else. And a bit after that, because it takes a number of weeks to restore your vitamin, like your vitamin D levels again, once you've deliberately pushed them down to do experiments. Which in the middle of a flu, it's better to do it in summer. These sort of experiments, not in winter or autumn and spring when there's less sort of these respiratory viruses going around. So anyway, here's what it is, or here's what happened. And then when I got the flu, a couple of weeks later, it knocked me out for 2 days. I couldn't believe it. Yeah. So definitely the flu's a much harsher in that regard compared to some sort of special weapon. You know what I mean? So it is way knocks you about in that regard. Always has, So, but I've in the past when I've maintained my levels of vitamin D status in the high normal when it comes to the flu, I got exposed on, for instance, a couple of days ago to the flu. Somebody had and I have no symptoms, as you can see. So having a good, and the same thing goes for the C19. People like around me are constantly getting it, especially my brother's partner, she's always getting it. Now she's actually listened and she's decided to get her vitamin D up to the good levels, plus her taurine levels through winter, up to 6 grams and all that. And pretty much she's been C19 free as well, and flu as well. So as long as you're improving your immune function to work well at the mucosal layers, you're going to stop that sort of stuff getting in. Very much like the tribal people, very good T lymphocyte, T cell activation, and all that to knock off at the mucosal layers. Perfect. I think that's another way, or even traditional vaccines should be taken, through the nasal, through some sort of nasal thing, not injection, but through nasal thing would be a hell of a lot safer. Because it is basically, that's how naturally something comes in, and that's where it needs to be stopped at the mucosal layers to get the best type of immune response and immunity without those other side effects that can actually happen from the other ways of doing it. Yes, so yes, apparently now they're building up factories to do it the wrong way in multiple countries because it's more profitable. Because they don't care about the health of people; it's more profitable. That's what really is important in this world. Yes, that is what is always more important in this world when it comes to those sort of things. Yes. Have you ever looked at studies on intravenous vitamin C, megadosing, 70 grams and all that, possibly anti-cancer treatment? No, it isn't, actually. It actually is a pro-cancer treatment. It's a bad idea, completely bad idea. Yeah. Pretty much people that have promoted this in the past, even, was his name Pollock or whatever, that actually promoted this, gave it to his wife, and actually she died. Not a good idea. What we have seen from, because we don't have any long-term studies in humans, you can't lock somebody in a lab and basically, this will be the last question, and I'll basically move on. Sorry about not being able to answer many other people's questions. It is what it is. But when it does come down to it, the only studies that we have are rodent studies, and what we see is that excessive vitamin E and even in the complex, it's not only even with the tocotrienols, except not only tocopherol, but also tocotrienols, the shorter ones. There seems to be a bit of a problem there as well, including vitamin C, because some level of oxidative stress has like a hormetic effect, or encourages the system, the certain intracellular antioxidant systems to work, and other reparative systems, certain organelles that actually get signaling to basically upregulate their function in terms of healing. And so when you actually give people too many antioxidants, so a bit like bodybuilding, if you do too much exercise, you don't get the results if you take a lot of antioxidants, because you're actually affecting this sort of damage and repair sort of cycle in those younger ages. So that's why it's not a good idea. The other thing is, it seems to also, because when you put a system under some level of oxidative stress, cancer cells are more likely to die than normal cells. Normal cells are a bit more robust because of their intracellular antioxidant systems. So if you give somebody high doses of an antioxidant, it actually allows for survival of cancer cells. Not a good idea. This is why there's a high level of correlation between high dosing vitamin E and C. So antioxidants are not a good idea. You should rely more on intracellular antioxidants at the physiological level that the body requires, because genes and other mechanisms and signaling determine how much to be used and synthesized and utilized. On the other hand, when you get over 70, I think the age for the rats was equivalent to humans of 71 and over, their intracellular antioxidant repair systems start falling off the cliff. Guess what happened? The rodents that were on the antioxidants before the age of 71 were dying at higher rates. Once the ones that remained survived from the group, the antioxidant group, those ones after the age of 71, equivalent in humans, were starting to do a bit better. So at a very old age, especially if you've got a lot of mitochondrial dysfunction and a whole lot of other, issues, antioxidants seem, in animal models, to have some level of benefit because they're compensating for the reduced intracellular mechanisms of repair and reducing oxidative stress. So that's what they're doing, and that's what they notice. Now, people will ask me, well, don't you recommend taurine, Harry? And doesn't that reduce oxidative stress? Different mechanism, not the same. Works differently. It doesn't suppress that general things. What it's doing is actually reducing lactate levels. That's what it's doing. So it's actually reducing, so it's forcing, rather than forcing lactate through the Cori cycle back to the liver, what it's doing, it's forcing it into the Krebs cycle to be oxidized and cleared out. So it lowers the threshold of lactate in the system. And as a consequence, you could train a bit longer. And it also upregulates certain intracellular antioxidant systems, but only at the physiological requirements. A small little bump up, but not enough to blunt the effect of the exercise that a supplement would do, because the body knows how to regulate these things very tightly. That's the difference. So, so the only reason why a vitamin E and vitamin C would have some efficacy would be after 71, and then specifically people that are on species-appropriate diets, it would have a benefit. For people that are on a species-appropriate diet, getting sufficient nutrition and maintaining good functioning intracellular oxidant systems and other things like that, and organelles working properly, not an issue. So it depends in that regard. But I would definitely not use intravenous vitamin C. There are some conditions that seem to help as a short-term intervention, but long-term is very deleterious from what we've seen from the animal research, because it's not allowing the body to, have some level of stress, some level of reactive oxygen species. If you don't have some, you don't want excessive, but you need some. If you suppress a lot of these things too much, you don't get the sort of, damage and repair sort of, that sort of systems of turning over and clearing out old stuff. You get the build-up of old stuff, and things just age and get more damaged and do not get repaired sufficiently. So that's probably the mechanism why those rodents were dying in larger numbers and only very small were surviving beyond that age bracket. So we have to be very careful and understand that. And that's why I'm very cagey about using any of these sort of methods. Okay, see you, Scotty. Take care, mate. He's got chores to do. The missus has told you to get your ass into the kitchen and clean things up. Sorry, mate. Just I need to amuse myself somehow. Yes, so those sort of things. Is anybody? I'm just going to quickly just go through and see whether there's anything anything that I can see that's really. I've talked about blue blocking ages, so you can actually go and take a look. There's plenty of covering it, and I will be covering that in the coming video. Isidoro, I'll be covering that. There's a video coming out this week, circadian rhythms, and I'll be covering a bit of that blue blocking stuff. Okay. Yeah, I'll discuss that. It's in that video, Johnny. You talk about LEDs and yeah, so there'll be a bit covering in that. Anything else that I'm? Oh, this one's interesting. Yes, yeah. Oxaloacetate, obviously, but even in like the gluconeogenesis, you're actually taking 2 ATPs, 2 carbon dioxide, and actually you are producing oxaloacetate. So it isn't, you can actually endogenously produce all these sort of things. You do not need carbohydrates to do it, because the body, when you understand the gluconeogenesis and how it produces oxaloacetate and then actually can synthesize the other stuff, you'll understand why all this is reductionist nonsense. Our bodies don't need a gram. They can produce all the glucose they need to be able to do these processes. It's demand driven. The body says, I need more. Here it is. And it's through hydrolysis. So once I do that, you'll understand that this whole notion, I need carbs for these biological processes to work. No, you don't. The body can synthesize it with very little effort and very little energy requirements. Once it actually comes out of the into the cytosol, out into, which is the inner part of the cell, where all the other organelles like mitochondria and everything else floats around, and your endoplasmic reticulum around your nucleus, all that fluid in there is a cytoplasm. When it gets there, it's another whole lot of hydrolysis steps that pretty much use close to neutral Higgs free energy. So you're pretty much using hydrolysis like a cascading effect, and that's why energy is at neutral. For somebody to say it's a costly thing, I need energy to do that, is bullshit, because it's hydrolysis and Higgs free energy is at neutral. If it was positive or very positive, or like glycolysis, which is 96.2 kilojoule mole to do, that's expensive. Glycolysis is expensive. To actually produce, whether glycogen or whatever, from the stuff you eat is actually more expensive. It's nonsense. Your body can actually produce glucose and all the requirements at a much lower cost, if you think about it. What would you rather have it at, a cheaper cost or a higher cost? And also higher in terms of glycation and all the other problems that are associated with it. Higher insulin, whatever, and all these others, higher leptin, and all these other problems and derangements. So it's just nonsense. It's just all the the same sort of bullshit that the Ray Pete fan club use and all that. I'll be covering all this in future videos to blow away all this nonsense. Because it is nonsense, complete and utter nonsense. Our bodies can furnish all the shit that it needs in a very low-cost way. It's only when we get involved with inappropriate things that we cause a lot of derangements. Anyway, guys, I have to blast out of here. Thank you for, we had a good amount of people. Yeah, we do have in about, 4:30, so 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, which is 4.5 hours, well, approximately 4.5 hours from now, there'll be the Eurasia. So if people are still awake at that stage, please come on and ask me your questions. Get your questions in early. It's really important to get your questions in early, and then I can answer them. So maybe we even I did send a link to the bald man. Maybe even he makes an appearance. You never know. He may just do. So we may get a bit of humour with Ted. You never know. So do turn up, please. And if you've got a question that I've missed, because there's probably, I can see there's a lot of questions here, and you want me to answer, just put it in the comments area, and I will, through the week when I'm at work. Obviously, I'm going to some sort of conference on Monday, so I've got no time. So you won't see me in the maybe if I get a chance in the break, I may just jump on the premiere, but you may not see me, depending if I get into some conversation with someone about spatial science and get involved too heavily. I may forget all about it. But through the week, I will, when I get a chance, I will go through and answer people. But I'm just busy with going to events, and then I've got a number of meetings through next week that are coming up. There's a lot of things happening in the early part and mid part of the week. Towards the end, it becomes a bit less, it's just more cruisy. So yeah, so it may not be immediate, but I always get to answer. I even get occasionally, I've gone back and found questions that I missed 2 years ago, and I still answer them. If I find them, I'll answer them. If they're recent, they will definitely get answered. If they're very old and I missed them because somebody left me, a whole lot of people left me, and then a week or whatever later, somebody left me a message and it just got lost in the trail of things, I usually get back to things at some point. I know it surprises some people, but I do. And when it comes to all the other stuff, thanks, Johnny. Thanks, mate. And Paul, thank you. And Jay, thank you as well. Yep, I will. Dad should have the lamb chops all nice and ready by the time I get there. So we'll get stuck into those, and he's got some really, the small little mozzarella, the rounded mozzarella. So he puts those out with a bit of feta cheese, goat cheese, and stuff like that. And yeah, we'll have a bit of that, and so that'll be enjoyable. I'll have, probably when I get back, I'll have some eggs later on. Probably some fried eggs or scrambled, depending on how I feel. And then I've got the next live stream, which is in about less than 4.5 hours from now. So I better get going so I can get all this done in that regard. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it, because you guys and your questions make this channel happen. Without you guys being here, this channel, is pretty much irrelevant to everyone. So it's you guys and your support. Thank you. Appreciate it. I hope you're getting something out of it. And, if no question's a difficult question, just ask me anything. And if I don't have an answer for you, I'll go and research it. And sometimes you may hear me in live stream say, look, I don't know about that subject matter. I'll go and look into it. And then I'll come back. I may make a video or make a comment when that person asks me again in that regard. But, I'm always willing to look at things. And occasionally I've corrected myself where new research has shown something different, or I've missed something, or I didn't cover something entirely. The boron issue was a thing, but I did say to the lady not to consume more than 3. She did, and she ended up with a mold deficiency. But I didn't explain why you shouldn't do it, and so that was a failure on my part and lack of completeness. But she didn't follow instructions as well, you could say. But it is what it is. But I still take responsibility because if I'm not explaining it properly, then it's my failure, not hers. Why you shouldn't take that extra stuff. Tracy, thank you for being here. Anyway, I will let you go. Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate it. I am out of here. See yous.